Hi guys, thanks for joining me once again for another round of Saturday Stories right here on Thailand Bound. I've got 4 stories for you today. I'm not actually in the video today. This is going to be one of those weeks where I've got a great background B-roll for you. You can watch that, reminisce from your days in Jomtien in Pattaya. It's a very nice piece of footage, and as said, I shot it just 2 weeks ago. Right, let's get into the first of 4 stories, and just to let you know, the first and the second stories are very, very short, which means the third and the fourth are a lot longer.
สวัสดีค่ะ
Since I first came to Thailand in 1990, I can say I have never seen such a rude Thai, but certainly rude Westerners. A few months ago in my condo complex, which is full of one nationality I won't mention here, a guy with no shirt came screaming down the stairs and shouting at reception because his electronic door card did not work. I am sure we have all at one time or another experienced an electronic door card that did not work. They replaced it and he was back 5 minutes later screaming that it still did not work. You would have thought it was the end of the world with this noise he made. I know the Thais did not appreciate this. Many years ago on Samui, I was staying in a resort I know well. Even 10 to 12 years ago, the time of budget backpacking had long gone. The huts had been replaced with luxury rooms you would not see back home. A group of Westerners from a particular land in the Middle East came in to ask about prices, and their command of English was not good. They thought it was still like the 70s where you could just bargain and get a price that was 20 years out of date. I was standing there and told them, "You're 20 years too late." The owner obviously was not going to give them one of his lovely rooms for a 20-year-old price, but being a nice guy and seeing they were not too well off, he offered to create a sleeping space for them out near the resort laundry building, as he knew they had no chance of finding anything on Chawang Beach. Due to the poor understanding of English, they threw his act of kindness back at him as an act to try and rob them and slandered his resort on internet reviews. They were not only poor tourists by today's standards, but they were also too stupid to recognise an act of kindness when it happened. And that's the end of that very, very short story. It's, you know, when you're in Thailand, you've got to keep your head about you. If you lose your temper and you start shouting, it'll get you nowhere. The Thais will completely disrespect you once you start raising your voice, okay? Right, let's jump straight into story number 2. And again, this is a fairly short one. I am a 70-year-old German living for 40 years in Sydney. In November 2023, I went to Ho Chi Minh City for a week's holiday. Before I left Australia, I purchased a SIM card online. Upon arrival in Vietnam, I activated the SIM card. However, Google Maps did not work properly. I tried to purchase a local physical SIM card. I wandered around the city centre looking for a mobile provider shop. In a shopping centre, a middle-aged lady approached me asking if she could be of any help. She spoke reasonably good English. We looked around together until she had the idea to call her son, who just happened to be close by. The 3 of us walked into a mobile shop. However, I didn't have my passport on me, and without a passport, they don't sell you a SIM card. The son had the idea to go to his area where you can get a SIM card without a passport. We called an Uber and went to the area. On arrival, we walked through a few narrow alleyways until we arrived at their house. An elderly guy was at home, maybe her brother. They served me lunch. The brother spoke very good English and told me that he was a croupier at a casino. Then he told me that last night a rich guy from Bahrain won £50,000 and had tipped him only 200. He was angry and wanted to get his own back at the guy using me to cheat with him at the blackjack table. We played a few rounds with casino chips, and he showed me the tricks he would do to beat the Bahrain guy. His sister played a part in the scam as well. Eventually, he put $200 for the sister and me on the table and wanted to play for real money. I said no, and he asked why, and if I don't do it for ethical reasons. I said yes, and that was the end of it. The son then asked me for money, about £10 for the SIM card and my iPhone. I said that I had to go to the shop too because my phone has face recognition. We went to the shop and I got the SIM card. Then we called an Uber and went back to the shopping centre where I met the lady and parted ways. However, Google Maps was still not working, and I switched roaming on with my Australian provider. This worked like a charm. At the end of the day, it all worked out well, but it could have gone the other way too. I will never be that careless again. So, as I've said in previous videos, it always surprises me when guys go off with strangers. You know, they get approached in a park by people who say, I want to speak English, let's go and have a cup of coffee or something. Or like this guy in a shopping mall. I've got a rule myself. If I want to go somewhere, I go, but I won't let somebody take me, especially somebody I don't know. And it's probably wise not to let people lead you astray as well. Right, let's get into a couple of longer stories. This one is story number 3. The following is a story about a Hungarian man named Albert and a bar girl called Nak. I would describe Albert as a highly intelligent, quick-witted guy who does not suffer fools gladly. A bit of an introvert, but very engaging when you get to know him. He had been living in the UK for over 10 years when I first met him. He speaks perfect English. I would not say he is particularly handsome, but certainly not bad looking. His only chance of female company would be via a financial transaction, if you know what I mean. Like many men who had head to Thailand, he had previously been in bad relationships with Western women. This is not a story about a naive guy who goes to Pattaya and is conned by a bar girl. I understand it does happen many days. Most of this story took place between 2016 and 2020. I first met Albert when we both worked as chefs at a well-known restaurant in central London in around 2013. During this time, we became good friends. We both left the restaurant after a couple of years. I moved to Spain and he got a job working as a private chef for a Russian family in London. This detail will become important later. We kept in touch, and whenever I was back in London, we would often meet up for a drink and catch up. I remember one time we met up. He had just come back from his first trip to Thailand. He had visited Phuket and straight away had been bitten by the Thailand bug. He returned full of stories about his first experience with Thai women, the beaches, islands, food, and was encouraging me to go there at the first chance I got. It seemed as though this experience had changed his life. Albert started visiting Thailand whenever he could. Every 3 or 4 months when he could get time off work, he would go for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, mainly to Pattaya and sometimes to Bangkok. During these holidays, he would usually see more than one girl, but didn't like to change too much. He would normally keep the same girl for more than a few days at a time. On around the 4th visit, he met Nak in a bar towards the top of Soi 6. The first night they met, he took her out of the bar and they spent the night drinking on Walking Street. He then took her out every day for the rest of his 3-week holidays. They both went up to Bangkok, took a boat tour along the river, stayed in nice hotels, ate at nice restaurants and generally enjoyed each other's company. Nak was not the typical bar girl from a village. Previously, she had been married to a Farang and lived in Bangkok for many years, working in an office. Unfortunately, the marriage had been an unhappy one, and after divorcing, she moved to Pattaya and started working in the bars. She started working in the bars relatively late as she was in her early 30s, but by the time these two met, she was already a seasoned pro and was making a lot of money working in the bar. Her English is pretty good and she has a great sense of humour. I would say that she is a bit more aware of the outside world than most Thai bar girls you tend to meet. By the end of the holiday, Albert had really fallen for Nak. He had to return to the UK for work but made his feelings very clear to her. On returning to the UK, they spoke every night after he finished work, often for hours at a time. They were already making plans of how they would be together long term. It's worth pointing out at this stage that Albert was certainly aware that she had to make money every day and would still be going out with customers from her bar. After a few more months, Albert returned to Thailand to spend another holiday with Nak. He told me that this time he arranged with the bar she worked in that he could pay one large bar fine. I believe it was in the region of 12,000 baht, so that any time he came back to her bar, she was allowed to leave with him, for an unlimited number of times as well. Like most men who fall in love, Albert didn't want Nak to keep seeing other customers, but he couldn't really afford to cover her living expenses. He was saving up for a deposit to buy a house in the UK, so they came to an arrangement that he would send her 15,000 baht a month and that she would not spend the night with any customers. This was a good compromise as she would still earn a good salary and they could talk on the phone each night. So their relationship continued like this for another year, with him visiting Thailand when he had a chance, usually every few months. All the time Albert was thinking how they could be together, he knew that there are not many work opportunities for foreigners in Thailand, and bringing her to the UK would be very difficult. After about a year, things changed. Albert had a big disagreement with his Russian employer and left the job, and unfortunately without a reference. He spent the next 6 months trying to find another private chef's job in London, but with no success. He did have a few temporary jobs, but none of them worked out. It seemed he was a bit fed up with his new line of work and wanted a change. During this period, I met him once. He was feeling dejected and disheartened. He'd used up a lot of his savings as it's so expensive to live in London. He informed me that he was going to Pattaya for a month to see his girlfriend and that after that he would come back and find another job. He booked a one-way ticket but had the intention of buying the return ticket later. At about the same time, I was offered a couple of months' work cooking for a politician in Indonesia. I had always wanted to visit Southeast Asia since I was a kid, so after completing the work in Indonesia, I decided to head on to Vietnam and travel around for a month. I also arranged to meet Albert in Pattaya. He had ended up staying there for over 2 months at this point. During this time, he had been paying Nak a small amount each day to compensate her for not working. I'm not sure the exact amount, but I believe it was less than 1,000 baht per day. I flew from Saigon to Bangkok, took a taxi down to Pattaya and stayed at a hotel on the third road. We met up the first evening on Soi 6. Now, I must say, I'd like to think of myself as a streetwise guy, but nothing could have prepared me for my first encounter with Soi 6. I can laugh now looking back, but at the time I was completely shell-shocked. Anyway, over the next week, he and his girlfriend showed me around Pattaya and explained how the system in the bars worked. We had a wonderful time, lots of laughs, and I had my first experience with Thai bar girls. Albert told me that he was having a great time in Pattaya with Nak and was feeling relaxed. He did say he was going to have to go back to the UK and make some money soon, but that he couldn't quite face doing that yet. Upon leaving, I invited him to join me in Vietnam for some of the trip. A couple of weeks later, he contacted me and we all met up in Hanoi. We did the usual sightseeing, Hanoi Hilton, the prisoner of war jail, then took some trips to Halong Bay and up to Sapa. For the most part, we had a really great time, except Nap kept complaining because she was outside of Thailand. She'd never been outside of Thailand before and spent a lot of time complaining about the food. During this trip, he confided in me and told me that his money was running low and he really needed to find a job soon, but he could use his credit card for a while if need be. After this trip, I took a job cooking for a family in the Swiss Alps. I felt absolutely miserable leaving Southeast Asia. I sat on the plane for 14 hours, stopped in Moscow for a few hours, and then arrived in Switzerland, where it was -10 some mornings. I spent the next few months being miserable working there, dreaming of returning to Asia the first chance I got. My luck came when the family I'd cooked for in Indonesia offered me to come and work for them on their yacht full time. I immediately said yes, packed my things and headed back to the warmth of Southeast Asia. I had a few weeks spare before starting back in Indonesia, so I decided I would have a little holiday in Thailand first. Albert had been there all this time and I was wondering how he could be surviving this long. It was a fantastic feeling arriving in Bangkok again. I spent a couple of days in Bangkok before heading down to Pattaya. However, this time things were quite different with my friend. He congratulated me on my new job, but I could see he was really depressed. The stress of his situation was really getting to him. By this time, it was too late for him to go back to the UK, as he only had a couple of £1,000s left, which wasn't enough for him to pay for the flight to the UK, pay for the deposit and the first month's rent on a room in central London, plus survive until he got paid. He had no family or friends willing to support him either. He also had a huge debt that he owed in the UK. He explained to me that when he worked for the Russian family, he used to do all the food and alcohol shopping each month. He would pay for it on his credit card and then the employer would reimburse him. This used to be at least £4,000 each month. So after about a year, Amex wrote to him and informed him they were increasing his credit limit to £50,000. He also extended his overdraft to £5,000 and took out another credit card with a £3,000 limit. So the past year he'd been living off these credit cards. He wasn't able to withdraw any cash with them, so he and his girlfriend used to buy gold using the card and then sell the gold when they needed cash. When his girlfriend first stopped working, he had paid her a small salary so she could send money to her mother who looked after her daughter. But now he was not able to pay her anything, with the bank and credit card companies contacting him, demanding their money to be repaid. From what I could see, Nak was genuinely in love with Albert because even though he wasn't paying her anything, she continued to stay with him. It was very sad seeing my friend fall on hard times. Albert and Nak had moved out of the condo they had rented and moved into Nak's small room. Unfortunately, at that time, I didn't particularly have a lot of money myself, but I gave Albert a few £100s and said I'd help him out again once I was settled into my new job. Towards the end of my holiday, Albert was acting a bit funny with me. I think perhaps he was a little bit annoyed with himself that I was off to start a new job and he was still there in Pattaya running out of money fast. He had a bit of a falling out about a month later. I was meant to pass on his CV for a job, but I had forgotten to, which annoyed him. After that, I didn't hear from him for about 6 months, but then one day he messaged me and said, "Hey, I know we haven't been so close recently, but I really need your help." I was immediately glad that he reached out to me. I read on, "I have found a permanent job in France. The family wants me to start on Thursday." It was a Monday. "I just need some help getting to France." I already had to sell my laptop. I replied that of course I would be more than happy to help and for him to just send me what flight details he needed and I will book it that evening. But he then told me that it would be more convenient if I sent him the money for the ticket, as in his words, I have a friend with a voucher for discounted flight tickets which I can use. I immediately thought this was very suspicious. I told him, "Okay, well, send a picture of the voucher and I will book it." After this, he never replied. I can only assume he was lying and there was no job. His number went dead shortly after that and his Facebook account was deleted. Looking back, I deeply regret not sending him the money, as he was obviously desperate. But at the same time, I didn't like him lying to me, and I've had bad experience with lending money in the past. I wish he had just been honest about the situation. At that time, I was in contact with one bar girl who knew Nak, so I asked her if she knew anything. She told me that Albert was still in Pattaya, living in the girl's room, and that now Nak was working a couple of days a week back at her old job on Soy 6. She was having to go with customers again to support them both. This news broke my heart, as it must have been terrible for the two of them. I don't know what became of them since. I hope he got himself out of trouble somehow. I'm trying to find out, but I've lost contact with the other bar girl. It does show, though, you can find the occasional diamond in the rough. Not all bar girls will drop you like a stone when the money runs out, although 99% probably will. I strongly advise against anyone getting emotionally involved with any bar girls. So this is one of those stories. Often guys will write into me and say, "Oh, that guy was a simp. He fell in love with a bar girl. How could he do it? He must be brainless." But this is what happens, guys go to Pattaya, they fall in love with the town, they meet a girl, they fall in love. It's not intentional. They don't go there to meet the girl of their dreams. They meet somebody, it becomes an everyday thing, and they fall in love and they just don't want to leave Pattaya. But unfortunately, if you've only got savings and you don't have any money coming in, those savings will soon be depleted and you will end up pretty desperate. I've seen it happen to people before. I've even seen one foreign guy begging with a sign that says "need money for ticket." The other thing is, I don't know how anybody could be in a relationship and actually stay in an apartment watching TV or whatever, knowing that the person he loved was out and probably sleeping with several guys each night that she was out working. It's just something personally I couldn't do. Very sad story. Okay, let's jump straight into story number 4. Southeast Asia in general and Thailand were never high on my list of places I wanted to visit until I was introduced to a Thai lady by a mutual friend at one of the local coffee shops here in Central Texas. She is married to a local attorney and owns and operates a spa in town. Several of the folk in our coffee shop group had been to her for massages. Each morning over coffee she would mention things about her home country that were interesting. Eventually I scheduled an appointment for a massage with her. During the massage, I had to ask her to take it a bit easier on me as I had never experienced a Thai massage before and my older body wasn't ready for that level of intensity. During the massage, she mentioned that in Thailand I would be paying about $10 for this massage rather than the $60 I was paying here in the USA. I've always been careful with money all of my life. Her statement got me curious. What were the costs of things in Thailand? I started to watch YouTube travel videos and then videos on all things about Thailand. That is how I discovered your channel, Peter. For a year, I watched several Thailand videos daily. I easily watched over 1,000 videos during the year. I felt that I was as knowledgeable as I could be, having never been to Thailand. I had a list of possible hotels that were guest-friendly in Bangkok and Chiang Mai in case I wanted some company. Who am I kidding? I knew I was going to seek out female company. The videos had me pretty well schooled on the scams of the cities, which are about the same as most other foreign countries, and I was aware of the bar girls' tactics and tricks. On my first trip to Bangkok, I arrived on the 9th of January 2018, just before midnight. After clearing immigration and customs and collecting my luggage, I knew from YouTube videos exactly where to go to get a taxi. It wasn't crowded and I walked directly to the little machine that dispenses taxi slips and the lady directed me to a taxi in slot 13. The videos prepared me well as I had a slip of paper with the name and address of my hotel written in both English and Thai to give to the driver. As he loaded my luggage into the boot, I insisted on him putting on the meter. The videos had warned me about guys who don't want to use the meters. He nodded yes. As we pulled away, the driver had not started the meter, so again I insisted, meter. He reluctantly started the meter. I think it took about 25 minutes to get to the hotel, but I wasn't watching the clock because my face was glued to the window looking at the night lights of the city. I had chosen a hotel on Sukhumvit Road between Nana and Asok BTS stations. As we turned onto Sukhumvit Road, I was shocked to see the traffic and thousands of people walking the streets as it was now about 1:30 in the morning. The videos showed me that this was to be the case, but until I saw it, I didn't truly understand. We stopped in front of my hotel and oh my God, there were about 20 young beautiful ladies and an equal number of ladyboys standing around the hotel entrance. Several of these ladies were trying to get my attention and I thought this is going to be a wonderful vacation. I got checked in and went straight to bed as the 28-hour trip had worn me out. I was up about 9 the next morning and decided to find a more Western type of place for my first meal in Thailand. I found a coffee shop on Soy 11 and ordered a coffee and a bagel. I then headed to the Jim Thompson Home Museum that I'd always wanted to see. YouTube had prepared me pretty well on how to use a BTS. Rather than use ticket vending machines, I chose to get a card as I would most likely use a BTS several times each day, and besides, the girl in the booth was cute and spoke some English. Using the BTS was relatively easy the first time and got even easier with each use. After visiting the Jim Thompson Museum, I went back to the hotel for a sleep as jet lag and the heat had taken its toll. After about a 3-hour sleep, I went to Terminal 21 food court to begin to get my stomach accustomed to the spiciness of Thai food before I tried street food. From YouTube, I knew the bar in the basement of my hotel opened at 8 p.m. and closed at 2 a.m. in the morning. I was excited to go there, but had a long talk with myself before going, saying you're old and you have money, but don't be foolish. I had the same talk with myself several times during the next 3 weeks. Foolishly, I thought opening at 8 p.m. meant what it said, but I got my first lesson in Thai time. I was near the steps going down to the bar at 8, but the doors were still locked. There were a few girls standing in line talking as they waited to get in. I stood above them, leaning on the stair rails where I could get a decent view. Might as well do a bit of window shopping while I waited. The doors finally opened at about 8:35, so down the stairs through the doors to be greeted by an employee. I'm not a big drinker, so I was glad to see some non-alcoholic choices. I did, however, go for a beer. A Chang, my first one. There is an S-shaped bar in the centre of this place, and as I was one of the first 30 people inside, I found a seat at the bar where I could watch to see how things worked here. What I saw was that the girls lined up along the outside perimeter and the inside at or near the S-shaped bar in the centre. They left a pathway between the two banks of beauties for the guys to walk, view and chat. There were only about 50 ladies inside now, but little by little more were coming in. I sat and nursed my beer for an hour or so just watching the girls and how things worked. An Australian guy sat next to me and we chatted. He said that the bar didn't fill up until about 10 or 10:30 and that Thursday, Friday and Saturday nights were the best nights for choosing female company. I decided to make one clockwise circle to look at all the girls over, but it turned into 2 laps as this seemed like an older man's heaven. I remembered I talked to myself and decided to leave and come back at about 10:30 p.m. I walked down Soy 11 just to see the bar and nightclub scene that catered to the younger crowd to pass the time. This was great for people watching, but at my age, just not my thing. I sampled a little street food and at 10:20 I headed back to the bar below the hotel. As I entered, the same blue-shirted employee made sure I went to the bar. This time I got a soft drink. The atmosphere inside was much livelier as there were now well over 100 girls in the bar. A variety of ages, sizes, fashion styles, something for every taste. I made my first circle of the place walking slowly. Many of the girls made eye contact, some smiled and others stared at their phones. I had decided to look for a slender girl who was cute rather than beautiful. There were at least 25 that fitted the bill, so I made another circle of the bar. That is when I saw a stunner and my plans changed. She was about 5 feet 2 inches and couldn't have weighed 100 pounds. She had the face of a movie star and was getting a lot of attention from a lot of guys. I timed my approach to her as the guy she had been talking to moved on. I stopped to chat, but after a minute it was apparent she spoke no English. She used Google Translate. She told me she only goes with Japanese businessmen. Later I found out from another girl that a few other girls also only went with Japanese or Korean businessmen. The girls apparently call these guys 444 men, meaning 4 inches, 4 minutes and 4,000 baht. Easy money, right? I politely excused myself and started another circle around the bar. I spotted the cutest girl who had her long hair braided into 2 strands. As I passed by, she looked directly into my eyes and smiled. I started a conversation with her and a brief chat. I asked her if she would like to spend some one-on-one time with me as my room was just above, and she agreed as it was now very crowded in the bar. I had a wonderful time and really enjoyed her company. This agenda became my daily routine for a week. Wake up at about 9, coffee and breakfast, taking the BTS and MRT to somewhere around the city to explore. Lunch around 2, a nap or massage in the heat of the afternoon, a swim at about 6 and out into the night about 8 p.m. On the second night at the same bar, I met Rutna. She was standing in a corner of the bar to the right of the front door. Because of the clockwise movement around the bar, I didn't see her until almost finishing my first round. She engaged me with a long smile. I returned the same, but decided to make another circle to see my options. On the second round, I received the second smile and I stopped. We chatted for a bit. Her English was limited, so we used Google Translate, but she changed it to Burmese rather than Thai. She was from Myanmar. Interesting. This was going to be a real multicultural vacation. Her manner was different than the first girl. She held my arm and smiled and laughed. We dropped her ID off with the lobby staff before going up to my room for drinks. There was another couple in the elevator with us. Rutna stood quietly beside me, but as soon as the second couple exited the elevator and we continued up, she took my arm again and squeezed it close to me. This night was even better than the first. She was amazingly attentive to my wants. Later, she saw my portable easel in the room and figured I was an artist. She asked if I could paint her picture. What a good ploy to see me again, but I didn't care because I wanted to see her again anyway. We agreed to meet in 2 days at the bar at 9. Our second meeting was just as good. Later, I took a good photo of her face for a portrait and convinced her to pose nude on the bed in a pose that did not show her face. I had never painted a nude before and was looking forward to it. I told her that I was leaving for Chiang Mai in a couple of days and that I would work on her painting while there. We agreed to meet in 10 days when I returned to Bangkok. I went to the hotel bar 2 more nights before leaving for Chiang Mai. Ratna was not there either night, which was good. Variety is the spice of life. Each night I took a different girl upstairs for drinks. Run was one of them, but she did not fit the criteria I had set for myself. But oh well. She was at least 5 feet 8 inches tall and slender and as beautiful as you can imagine. I went to Chiang Mai for a week. The pace was much slower and I enjoyed daily massages rather than aerobics. I completed Ratna's portrait and was anxious to see her again to give it to her. My week in Chiang Mai was just enough to get me relaxed and whet my appetite for Bangkok again. I contacted Ratna via line as soon as I got back to Bangkok and she agreed to come to my new hotel on Sukhumvit Soi 15. I met her in the lobby and told her I had finished her portrait. She became so excited and insisted we go to my room so she could take a look immediately. When she saw it, she broke into tears. Thank goodness they were tears of joy. I told her that the painting was hers. She said she would send it to her parents in Myanmar. We sat on the bed and she said she wanted to stay with me all night without compensation. I agreed but knew I would help her out as this poor girl financially anyway, as I was sure she needed the money to send back to the parents just mentioned. That night and next morning we enjoyed each other's company, communicating as best as possible. Ratna left about 9:30 a.m. to go to her real job in a small restaurant. She would come back to the hotel about 8 p.m. I told her that I was going to Pattaya after our next meeting so I could not stay up too late. Ratna got to the hotel about 8:20. We went straight to the room. Everything was good, but there wasn't the level of excitement on either of our parts. I was ready to move on, but sad to leave Ratna's company. About 11, she left saying I should get some sleep. I opened the door for her and she walked out and down the hallway towards the elevator. I was sure she would look back over her shoulder at me. She didn't. Was it because business was over or because she was sad because I was leaving? I chose the latter explanation. If I had been 40 years younger, I could have been one of those guys who got onto the hook to send money from the US to her. Heck, if I were 20 years younger, I might have. But rather than being a total old fool, I'm only an old fellow that had a wonderful time. I went back to Thailand in 2020 and got out of the country just in time as a pandemic was breaking out in Vietnam. I was scheduled to go back for a third time in 2021, but of course that was cancelled. I'm making plans now for January 2025, hoping that I can return. I don't have many more years of good health, so I cannot afford to miss another year. I can't wait to return. If there is a moral to this story, I guess it is that even a 70-year-old can have a great time in Thailand. Another nice story there. He's obviously talking about Therme Cafe, which has been around forever and a day, the basement cafe there under the hotel. It's one of those sort of places that a lot of the girls who hang out in Therme Cafe, especially on a Friday and Saturday night, they do have regular jobs. They kind of, they work regular jobs, but they just don't have enough money to make ends meet, or they might get a large bill coming and they just haven't got the money to pay it. So what they'll do, they'll kind of be part-time. They'll go down to Therme the odd night, the odd couple of nights, whatever. So you can find girls there who are genuine girls. They just do that occasionally. But for the most part, most of the girls in there are kind of full-time. They're there every night, and a lot of them there have a lot of sponsors, or a lot of guys in countries around the world sending them money. Okay, right, that's it for this week. I'll be back in the picture next week, as they say. I've promised that I would do this every other week because some guys like this format of just having the background video. As always, guys, if you're sitting on a story and you're not sure to send it in, please do. I'll change names, I'll make it anonymous, and you too can have your story read out right here on Thailand Bound. Thanks, guys.